Hashtag Wednesday thoughts, hashtag Wednesday motivation, hashtag Wednesday whatever you would like it to be. It's Tim from SkiRexMedia.com once again. I thought I would get a little personal with today's episode. I was almost thinking about calling this like a story time type of thing, but there really isn't going to be a story for this one. This is actually going to be more about the reasons that there is not a story. Now, I know quite a bit about the skiing and snowboarding world, even though there are parts of it I haven't experienced. Skiing is something that I have loved for a long time now, and even though there are parts of the sport and lifestyle that I may not have lived, I've always been able to appreciate them. I'm not one of those people that thinks a person has to be all in to be a fan. Not having experienced something just makes a person a different kind of fan. For example, I like watching curling during the Winter Olympics, but I've never played it before. I've never seen it other than on TV, and I can't even say that I'm a really big fan of the game, but I do know enough about it to watch it during the Olympic Games, and I enjoy it. I'm sure most of us can say that about a few sports or even other things in our lives. So while there are a few things I've never experienced in my ski life, there is one that sticks out above the rest for me, and that would be heli-skiing. It's one of those things that I thought about taking part in when I found out about it in my teens, but never did it. And the reason it sticks out is because of the excuses that I made for not doing it. That's right, I am openly admitting after years and years and years that it was just a bunch of excuses. However, there is now at least one reason that really isn't an excuse. It's more of an inconvenience that I've discovered over the last few years, but we'll get to that a little bit later. For now, let's start with the simplest excuse, a lack of funding. Now, we all know that skiing and riding can be really expensive sports, but there are ways around the cost. For me, it was working at a mountain, so I had a pass and it worked at more than one mountain. I was at Mount Snow during the days of the American Skiing Company, one of the early Mega Pass examples. So I could ski a bunch of places and not have to pay for it. I also knew how to shop for gear, including taking advantage of some insider info from the mountain. For example, there was this time that news of year-old, been sitting in storage, never been used demo skis were for sale at the rental shop. $80 got me a pair of Rosignol skis with marker bindings, brand new, aside from being in storage for the year, like I said. And those suckers were 197s and they were straight cut. I got them in the late 90s when parabolic cut skis were getting big, so it was almost a novelty that I got straight skis. Anyway, with a little know-how and work, the financial burden of skiing or riding can be cut down. But I was in Vermont. There were no heli operations out here at this time. There aren't any now. So how could I use my contacts or employee discount to cut the price of that down? Well, I couldn't. But let's be honest, one season of saving money and I could have gone the next season. It really would have just been that simple, so money really was just an excuse. So what would the next excuse be then? As I remember, it was travel time. Those who know me best and talked about this over the years knew that was about a load of bullshit. Actually, even those who only know me a little bit know that I like to travel and that I'm willing to get into the car for a road trip at the drop of a hat. So getting to a place with a heli operation might have taken a while, but anyone who knows me knows that I would have been down for that trip. Are you asking why I didn't just get in the car and go? You probably are, but I'll answer that question anyway. During my time at Mount Snow, I was in high school and working, and then after graduation I was ski bumming but also working. Then I left Vermont for New Jersey where I was working, and you can kind of see where I'm going with this. At that time I was a pretty decent and hard worker, so I wasn't always willing to take a lot of time off. Again though, that's just an excuse. I had taken time off from work for other things, including ski vacations back to Vermont with a bunch of my Jersey friends. But that leads us to the real reason why I was avoiding it. You see, one could easily ask, if it's not having enough time to get to drive to these places, why not fly out? That would be the right question, and the answer is that I'm afraid to fly. I am afraid to fly, and I don't do it if I don't have to. Actually, I only flew on a commercial jet for the first time about 5 years ago, and that took some coaxing from a friend of mine to do it. I was not only afraid to fly on planes, I certainly had no intention of going up in a helicopter. Again, even though I have done it, I still avoid it the best that I can. And I know it's kind of a dumb fear, too. I know how safe flying actually is, and I have gone up and down and had no issue, and yet it still freaks me out even just talking about it. In fact, I started thinking about trying it out again while I was living in Las Vegas a couple years ago. I would see the Grand Canyon and Lake Mead helicopter tours flying over the place I worked there, and thought about maybe trying one of those first. Maybe if I did that, I could get used to it and then go up into the mountains. But I just couldn't do it. The real thing that bothers me about it is that I couldn't put the fear aside long enough to get what had the potential of being one of the greatest skiing adventures I could ever have. I could have just called up my ski group, set up the trip, and headed out. I've seen more than my share of heli trips in films and in pictures, and I've read more than a little bit about the subject. I know what kind of adventure it could be, the coolest landscapes one could see, and even got a kick out of the thought of maybe snagging a first descent somewhere. But I'm too chicken to make it happen. Now that makes it seem like I have regrets about not doing it, and I guess in some ways I do. I've put that fear aside for other things and got on planes. But there is something about the helicopter that makes it even worse. Part of me thinks that it's the size or the way it'll ride. I've been told that the smaller the aircraft, the more one can feel the ride, and I'm not sure I would handle that well. Especially since I seem to get motion sick a little easier now than I did when I was younger, which is kind of strange, right? So that, combined with being afraid of flying, has really kept me from getting up there. The funny thing about the fear, though, now that I think about it, is that I've never been afraid to ski. I've been questioned about that in the past, too. How can I be afraid to fly, but not afraid to strap a couple of sticks to my feet and throw myself down a mountain, even after being injured doing it? I think that falls under to each their own. Some people are afraid of some things and some aren't. Some people are afraid of heights, which is something else that can stop a person from heading up into the high mountains, but I've never been afraid of heights. I'm not afraid of being up high at all. I just don't like getting there via air travel. But speaking of heights, there is something else that has kept me from doing it now that I am older. It's not a fear thing either. It's actually not even really accurate to say that it has anything to do with heights as much as it does elevation. I've come to find over the last few years that high elevations and I don't always mix. I ended up dealing with altitude sickness more than once while I was living in Las Vegas. I mean, for a while I was getting good. I could take a drive up to about 8,000 or 8,500 feet with no issue after a while. But anytime I get too much over 9,000, I just can't take it. About 9,300 feet is the highest I've pushed myself. But I find that getting to 8,000 isn't always easy for me these days. So fear isn't an issue there, but convenience is. As in, it's inconvenient for me to travel to high elevations because my body just hates it. Funny side note, I saw Chris Davenport speaking in New Hampshire one night not long ago talking about some of his travels. And during his Q&A session, after all those good stories, the only thing I wanted to ask is how he deals with altitude sickness. So there you go. But that one really isn't an excuse. That's a real thing. But I don't know if you've noticed, though, I haven't brought up my abilities. I've watched a few movies with friends, and they've remarked from time to time that there's no way they could ever ski some of that stuff because they aren't good enough. And I do agree with some of it. Some of it takes extra mountaineering skills that I don't have, but there's a fair amount that doesn't. I'm not going to say that I'm anywhere near pro level, but I was pretty good for a long time. I could ski most terrain that I came across. I mean, even now I could still ski bumps, but I choose not to. Actually, it's my knees that choose not to, but you know what I mean. But anyway, I've done my share of double diamond runs, bump runs, glade runs, runs on holidays where people were shoulder to shoulder at the mountain. I was good enough, believe me. It really was and is just the fact that I'm a chicken shit when it comes to air travel. I'd like to be able to close this out by saying something inspiring about not letting fear get the better of you, but if I did that, I'd be a hypocrite, and I'd kinda like to maintain my credibility. I mean, fears are meant to be faced, and I really hope that you are able to, no matter what they might be. But don't get down on yourself too bad if you can't. While you're beating yourself up about how much you're afraid to try one thing, something else can slip right past you. And with that little bit of positivity, it feels like a good place to close out this episode. I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a story about me, this little bit of my autobiography, which I am currently working on. But this bit of information won't be in it. So if you read the book when I finish it and put it out, consider having listened to this a bonus. If you do like listening to the podcast, please subscribe to it, whether it's on the Buzzsprout site, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, on the YouTube channel, or if you just listen to it from skirexmedia.com. I'd really appreciate it if you did follow and subscribe wherever you'd like to and are able. To that point, there are also the Facebook and Twitter pages that you can follow. I always put all the new content from the website up there and all the new content from the podcast up there. Plus, I sometimes throw other little tidbits up on those platforms, so check those out too, please. All the information for those should be in the description with links and everything you need to be part of the Ski Rex Media community. I would really like it to be a community too. Like, don't hesitate to leave comments where you can, and you can email me, which is also linked in the description. I like the fan interaction and would like to get more of it if we can. Like I've said before, that could lead to some of you talking with me on this podcast, and that could be fun, so think about that too, okay? With that, I hope you have a good morning, day, evening, or good night, and I'll see you when I see you. Later.